Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, bringing to you some juicy bonus content for you all tonight. A YouTube friend of mine informed me that he had the perfect video in the works that would be suitable for this channel's audience. Upon viewing this high quality content myself, I have to say I could not agree more. So without further ado, I would like to leave you in the capable hands of Stika, one of Portugal's premier vintage gaming YouTubers. Yeah! Actually no, wait. Let me do this in Portuguese for a change. Sim! Has a nice ring to it.
Well, I see nothing wrong here. You know, even though I live in a country where the most popular official 8-bit console was the Master System, many of us actually owned bootleg NES clones. Not only were they cheaper, but they also came with dozens of games in their memory. My console, for example, the Family game, came with 42 unique games in its memory, though this is a topic I've already covered. But sooner or later, you get tired of playing the same games over and over again, and that's where you'd get one of these bootleg cards. I used to rent a lot of these games when I was a kid, but sadly, this is the only one that survived the journey. Yes, most of my NES experience was spent paying 50 cents a day to rent bootleg NES games to play on my bootleg NES console. But for me, all of this began when my brother came home one day with a bootleg copy of Street Fighter II for the NES. In fact, my brother is going to be a bit of a common topic in this video. But before we talk about the game he brought, I want to talk about a different bootleg copy of Street Fighter II for the NES. The first game on this list is Street Fighter II Pro by Konami, which apparently launched in 1993. I say first because, as we'll soon find out, there are a lot of NES Street Fighter bootlegs out there. In fact, during this time, there were almost as many Street Fighter bootlegs as there were bootleg NES developers, and each had their own take on the game or genre. Anyway, playing this, you can clearly see the characters' portraits more or less retain their poses. Which makes sense, as the developers most likely had to create the game without any access to the original assets. Sadly, while playing this, you can easily tell the characters are perhaps too big for the NES, as the sprite flicker can go from manageable to pretty egregious. The controls are also super stiff. Try as I might, I cannot pull off a Hadouken, Hurricane Kick, or any moves. Not to mention that the hit detection is about as wonky as you'd expect, making it easy for you or your foe to get stuck in a multiple hit succession. I eventually fell back to the tried and true method of Street Fighter bootlegs, which is to play as Dalsim. Basically, no matter which Street Fighter clone you're playing, or who made it, if Dalsim is available, he's going to be overpowered. He has the longest reach, which allows for cheap hits. But the developers never balance this by making him slower than everyone else, like in the arcade. So you essentially have a character that is usually better than the bosses. Overall, I can't really say that this clone is very fun, and the color choices for the backgrounds can be quite odd as well. I like the purple elephants in Dalsim's stage, but the green street in China is most definitely something else. We now move on to the game I did want to talk about. The game my brother brought home and my introduction to Street Fighter. This is 1992's Yoko soft version of Street Fighter II The World Warrior for the NES. Yes, This is how I learned about Street Fighter 2. At the time, I was still in kindergarten or elementary school, and I was too young to visit an arcade, as most arcade owners would ask you to leave if you were below a certain age. And none of my friends owned a Super Nintendo or Mega Drive yet, so I had no idea what a Street Fighter was. But you know what's most surprising about this? This port is actually decent. For starters, it's just porting the original World Warrior, so the developers chose the most basic version of Street Fighter 2, which is most likely a good idea if you're going to try and bring this game to the NES without access to any of the source code, original assets, or even an official NES dev kit. Secondly, it's also the only game that tries to mimic the arcade version as closely as possible. What I mean is, you have the arcade intro, a reasonable attempt at emulating the arcade soundtrack and sound effects, but more importantly, the gameplay. It's good. I mean, okay, maybe good is a strong word, but it's actually not bad. The hit detection is pretty good. The moves are easy to pull off, and if your opponent or you get hit, you're thrown back and given a grace period to prevent you from getting stuck in an infinite hit loop, similar to what the arcade version does. Even the backgrounds look pretty decent. Compare Chun-Li's stage to the previous game we saw, and it's clear the developers took the effort to try and create a reasonably faithful port of Street Fighter 2. Now, the developers clearly had to scale back in some regards. For starters, the original roster has been slashed by half, from 8 to just 4. You get Ryu, Chun-Li, Guile, and Zangief. Though clearly, they had some trouble getting Zangief's proportions right, and I'm fairly certain every character is set to emulate Ryu's speed. But for the most part, this is a really impressive port, and of all the videos I see on YouTube discussing, or rather mocking, the various Street Fighter bootlegs out there, I rarely see this one get a mention. And that's a shame, because it's clear a lot of love was put into this version. I'm honestly just as surprised as you are that this port is actually decent. I mean, I still would not recommend it as anyone's introduction to this series, but considering the rest of the games in this video, I could have done far worse. Now, I don't know if my brother wasn't happy with the port he rented, or if he was curious to try different versions, because a few weeks after returning Street Fighter 2, he came back with Street Fighter 3. Now this one is a bit more ambitious, as the roster has been expanded to 9 characters, and you can even play as some of the bosses. However, we're already off to a bad start, as the portrait redesigns suffered quite a bit in this translation. Some of the backgrounds were also completely changed. For example, Chun-Li's stage was changed to the Forbidden City in China. Perhaps the developers thought that it was a better representation of what I assume is their home nation. The music also seems to make no attempt at emulating the original arcade game. The sprite flicker is also back, though not as bad as the one found in Street Fighter 2 Pro. But where the game really took a hit was the gameplay department. You can still pull off moves with relative success, though not as much as the previous game. But the way the speed, flow, and hit detection are set up make them almost superfluous, ignoring the special moves and just playing the game trying to string combos. I did struggle quite a bit with this version. I eventually fell back to the tried and true bootleg method of picking Dalsum and playing like a cheap bastard to finally get a win. I still can't get very far with Dalsum, but I can at least tell you that as a kid, he was the only character I was able to finish this version with. That's a lot of Street Fighter. let's take a break, okay, and check out something else. Going back to this version, this game wasn't just my introduction to Street Fighter 2. It also introduced me to the concept of game rentals. So every week, I'd beg my parents to take me to the stationery shop that had these. Oh, did I not mention that? Yeah, I rented all of my games from a stationery shop near school. What, you thought I went to Toys R Us? Come on now. And I'd rent whatever it is they had available, which oddly enough kept changing and rotating every few months. I got to play games like Super Mario 2, Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja, X-Men, Spider-Man, Sonic the Hedgehog, Captain America. Oh wait, you want to know more about the last one? Yes, I played Sonic the Hedgehog for the NES. Well, kind of. Technically, it's called Super Mario Sonic 2. Sonic with a K, of course. How else would you spell it? But in reality, it was just a bootleg copy of Capcom's Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers 2, with the sprites altered to play as Sonic or Mario. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I died trying to kill enemies like you're supposed to do in the Mega Drive games. I have no idea how long it took me to realize that you had to pick up the crates and throw them at your enemies. Other than that, it's Chip 'n Dale 2. Good game, but nothing too interesting about it. Another game my brother rented was Fatal Fury 2, developed by Konami. You know, the same dudes who created the first Street Fighter game we talked about in this video. So clearly, we've got a quality product on our hands. Well, they've certainly grown. They're even trying to emulate the arcade intro. Good for them. Not sure what is up with my face though. Also, you gotta love the Konami Corporation of America legal info. Though once again, they need to work on those character portrait faces. Oh my, what have they done to you? Man, this sprite flicker is painful to look at. And once again, I'm having a really hard time pulling off any moves. Try as I might, I can't even pull off a Kachosen. Eventually, I started using the game's wonky hit detection to chain broken combos like a motherfucker. Sadly, I can't really recommend this one either. But the Fatal Fury train doesn't stop there. We also got Fatal Fury Special. No idea who made this one, but it doesn't seem like it was Konami. Well, first of all, this game looks amazing for the NES. I'm counting 3 layers of simulated parallax scrolling, and I've played 16-bit games that don't even manage that. Considering this was made by bootleggers, this is really impressive. And it was achieved with minimal slowdown as well. The combat and flow of the game is also much better than the previous title. I mean, it's not good per se, but it's a definite improvement. The hit detection is still wonky to say the least though, but I can at least pull off the special moves with relative ease. Although, it is weird that when I try to pull off a Ryuenbu, she does her flying attack instead. Other than that, I guess it's okay. It could definitely be far worse. Well, that's enough of that. Let's check out more Street Fighter. Street Fighter 02 is a port of Street Fighter Alpha 2 for the NES. Not a game we rented back in the day, but one I wanted to check out as I did play this on emulators sometime during the mid-2000s. I remember it being a graphically impressive, if boring game. And yeah, that's definitely what we have here. The detail and colors are super impressive for the system, as are the character animations. And the combat doesn't feel too bad either. A little wonky, sure, but that's to be expected. Though you can get stuck in an infinite combo loop. The issue comes from the fact that you can spam super moves anytime you want. There's no bar to fill up and you can use them at will. You're not even required to use a special input to activate it. Simply press A and B at the same time, and you can spam it as much as you want. Graphically impressive and a neat curiosity that someone would attempt to port this game to the NES. But that's about it. Street Fighter 6 12 Peoples. Ah yes, now we're starting to enter that period where bootleggers would just keep trying to add more characters or whatever random bullshit they thought would get you to buy their game. Apparently by 12 Peoples, they mean 6 characters and their palette swap versions. Sadly, try as I might, I can't get very far in this one. For starters, blocking is pretty much useless. As you take so much damage from it, you might as well just jump. I also can't seem to pull off any of the moves. And there's also this weird rubber banding thing going on, where the game just suddenly drags you or your opponent to the middle of the screen. It's weird. I mean, I can't even pull off Chun-Li's lightning kicks. This one is pretty bad. Definitely not worth your time. Street Fighter V is the net-edited version of Street Fighter 6. Because, as we all know, fuck numbers. I say updated because the character roster has been expanded. And by expanded, I mean with real characters, not just palette swapped versions of existing ones. Not only that, but the combat engine was clearly tweaked. I can actually pull off special moves now. And Chun-Li's movement is much closer to that of the arcade. You also might have noticed a very familiar looking character who should not be in a Street Fighter game. Yeah, this is a sort of random bullshit bootleg developers would throw to get you to buy their games. Well, I'm sorry to say, no, you can't play as Goku. It's just Balrog. But let's keep this inverted numbering system train going and check out Street Fighter 4. Oh, what's that? You don't recognize any of the characters here? That's right! This is a completely original fighting game. And would you believe me if I told you that I also played this game back in the day? Basically, a friend of mine had bought, yes, you heard me, bought a cartridge with this game on it, and even lent it to me a few times. And yes, by this point, I was already familiarized with Street Fighter 2, as it had been a few years since I played this version, and some of my friends now had Mega Drives or Super Nintendos. I was even old enough to be allowed in arcades now. Also, I freaking love this game. No joke, I played this game to death, and you know, it's not bad. It's not good either, but at the time, I only had a Famiclone and a 386 IBM PC, none of which were famous for their fighting games. And this game, well, the hit detection, it's fine. The combat system doesn't seem outwardly broken like some other games. So yeah, this game is kinda decent. It could have been its own full game had it not launched in a time when the 16-bit generation was already in its full swing and maybe even coming to an end in roughly 2 years. I do remember that I managed to complete this game by basically playing as Chun-Fo and just spamming his spinning bird kick. But that only seems to be partially working these days, so maybe there's more to it than I remember. Overall, I still kind of enjoy this one. Oh god, this is somehow both too much Street Fighter and barely any Street Fighter all at the same time. But we still got more games. Just give me a minute, I need another one. I'm ready. Card Fighter? What in the world is... Oh, no. No. Well, this is... pretty amazing actually. I thought my fighting game childhood was unique, but clearly someone out there has me beat. Yes, it's a one-on-one fighting game with Mario, and it is amazing. Not the gameplay of course, but the concept sure is. Although I gotta say, from a technical standpoint, a lot of effort was put into this. The characters are nicely detailed and colored. I mean, sure, Mario's face is kinda... yeah. But the rest is actually not bad. I mean, the backgrounds do look like they're from a Mario game. And the moves are relatively easy to pull off. The hit detection isn't bad either. Most likely, the weakest part of this game is the music. Honestly, they probably should have just ripped some songs from the NES titles. I don't know what you say. It's weird, it's unique, but it's also kinda not bad. You know, by bootleg NES game standards. But our good friends at Coney were not happy being outdone. So they threw their head into the ring once more, and what we got is... World Heroes 2! With a name like that, you'd think it was a bootleg for the SNK game. But actually no, it's a mix of Street Fighter, Super Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fatal Fury, and Final Fight all rolled into one. There's a Smash Brothers joke in there somewhere, but that's beneath me. So, did our good friends at Coney actually get it right this time? Well, I think it's their best effort so far, but it's still not what I'd call good. The combat system is still just as wonky, but at least this time, I'm just too entertained to really care. Do I recommend this game? Well, yeah! Name one game where you can play as Chun-Li and kick Goku's ass. Oh, you mean for the gameplay? No, of course not. So this is where our NES Street Fighter journey comes to an end. But we still have more Street Fighter games to cover. It was clear our little Famiclone was not going to cover my brother's craving for Street Fighter. So he went out and bought the MS-DOS port of Street Fighter 2 by US Gold. And if the name US Gold means anything to you, you know how much of a mistake that was. US Gold is known for its rushed ports and quick cash grabs of other more popular games. And that's exactly what we've got here. Sure, the game looked the part, but once you actually start playing it, you'd soon realize how terrible the frame rate is, the awful controls, the wonky hit detection, the zoomed in camera, and just how difficult it was to pull off any of the moves. I distinctly remember that for whatever reason, we could only pull off a Hadouken on the right side of the screen, not the left. But that could have just been our inability. Oh, also, I hope you like listening to the intro and character select songs, because that's all you're gonna get. No more Street Fighter games. Please, no more. But we're still not done yet. We still got one more game to cover. It was clear that my brother wasn't the only one unhappy with the official MS-DOS port, because someone in Korea heard our pleas. And eventually, one day my brother came across a pirate copy of Street Fighter 2 known as Street Fighter 2 Zhang Young Dug Edition. From what I could find online, this is a bootleg port of Street Fighter 2 for the MS-DOS created by just one guy, in which he basically tried to rebuild the SNES port by playing the game and use a capture card to rip the animations and backgrounds. Now, I'm using someone else's footage for this one, as for some reason I couldn't get this running on DOSBox. But this was it! Sure, it did not look as good as the US Gold port, with its static backgrounds and generally blurry graphics. It also had some wonkiness, like fighting characters in the wrong stages. But for the time, the gameplay was perfect. The hit detection was spot on. The frame rate was occasionally choppy, but pretty close to the arcade, and it was a joy to play, especially when compared to everything we came across before. And at times, the music was even kinda decent. In time, the developer would go on to launch updated versions, and even his own improvements, like new victory dialogue lines, adding Terry Bogard, and whatever this is.
You win!
But for a couple of Portuguese kids with a bootleg Famiclone and an outdated 386 IBM PC, this was the closest we'd get to playing Street Fighter at home. And then, finally, in the early 2000s, we'd buy a Game Boy Advance and Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper. And finally, roughly 10 years after our journey began, we finally got the Street Fighter home experience we were so desperately craving for. Hey everyone, as you might have noticed, I'm not Top Hat Gaming Man. My name is Stika, that's Stika with a 1, and I'm a retro gamer from Portugal. I do a lot of documentary videos on Portuguese and Brazilian gaming history, like the Sega BDSM themed game show, the history of how Wonder Boy was changed into Monica in Brazil, or how Dragon Ball Z saved the Sega Saturn in Portugal. I also do reviews of classic games and modern games for retro consoles, like the 2019 releases of Xeno Crisis and Tensor for the Mega Drive. This wasn't the first time that me and Top Hat Gaming Man have worked together, as we have also done the Zibo video before. But while I was working on this video, I sort of realized that this was something you guys might enjoy. And I certainly hope you did. So if you want to see more of my content, please check out my channel. I'll do my best to not embarrass myself. No promises. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Bye!